The Shadow Market. Chapter 1. A City Without Memory. Hamburg in the year 2091 looked perfect on the outside. The streets were clean. The buildings were tall and smooth. The air was quiet. People walked calmly, spoke softly, and followed the rules. There were no loud arguments, no laughter in the parks, no tears in public. Everything was in order. But something was missing. In this future city, emotions were seen as dangerous. Strong feelings could lead to mistakes, to chaos, to pain. So the government created a system to help people stay safe. Everyone had a digital vault. It was a private memory storage. People could upload their memories into it, both good and bad, and then forget them. They could live without the weight of the past. They could move forward without fear, without sadness, without love. Most people accepted this system. They believed it was better to live without pain. They believed that forgetting was a kind of freedom. But not everyone felt the same. Nora West was 38 years old. She worked as an archivist in the Central Memory Office. Her job was to organize and protect the memories that people chose to store. She spent her days in a quiet room, surrounded by screens and files. She wore simple clothes and kept her hair tied back. She didn't talk much to others. She liked silence. She liked order. But Nora was also observant. She noticed small things. She watched patterns. And one day, she saw something strange. Some memory files were missing. Not many, but enough to make her curious. These files were not deleted by mistake. They were removed on purpose. And they were not just any memories. They were the strongest ones, memories of deep love, of painful loss, of joy and sorrow. They were the moments that made people human. At first, Nora thought it was a system error. But when she checked the records, she saw that the files had been accessed and taken. No names, no reasons. Just gone. She tried to report it, but her message was ignored. The system said everything was normal. Nora began to feel uneasy. She had always followed the rules. She had never questioned the system. But now, she started to wonder. Why would someone take only the most emotional memories? Who would want them? And for what purpose? She started to look deeper. Late at night, after her shift, she stayed in the archive and searched through the data. She found more missing files. She made a list. She read the summaries of the memories before they disappeared. A mother holding her child for the first time. A man saying goodbye to his brother. A woman dancing alone in the rain. These were not dangerous. They were beautiful. They were real. Nora didn't know what to do. She felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, confusion, and maybe even fear. But also something else. A quiet pull inside her. A need to understand. A need to remember. Outside, the city lights glowed in perfect lines. The trains ran on time. The people smiled politely. But under the surface, something was changing. And Nora West, the quiet archivist, was about to step into a world she never knew existed. A world where memories were not just stored, but stolen. A world where emotions were not forgotten, but sold. And in that world, she would have to decide what was more dangerous, remembering or forgetting. Chapter 2. The First Deal. Nora West continued her search. The missing memory files were not random. They were carefully selected. She followed digital traces, old records, and quiet rumors. After weeks of quiet investigation, she found something strange. It was not part of the official system. It was hidden deep in the city's network. People called it the shadow market. The shadow market was not a place with signs or doors. It was secret, quiet, and protected. Only a few people knew how to find it. Nora followed a hidden path through old tunnels and forgotten buildings. She reached a dark hall filled with soft lights and quiet voices. There were no advertisements, no machines. Just people sitting at tables, trading something invisible. In the shadow market, emotions and memories were sold like objects. A person could buy someone else's joy, sadness, or even their first love. These feelings were stored in small capsules, like drops of light. When someone touched a capsule, the emotion entered their body. It felt real. It became part of them. Eric Muller was one of the first people Nora saw there. He was a quiet man with tired eyes. Years ago, he had been a doctor. He had helped many people. But after losing his daughter, he could not live with the pain. He came to the market and sold the memory of her. He thought it would help him heal. But after the deal, he felt nothing. No sadness, no joy. Just emptiness. The memory was gone, but so was the love. Lena Hoffman was young and curious. She had heard stories about the market and wanted to see it for herself. She didn't plan to buy anything. But when she touched a capsule by mistake, she absorbed someone's fear. It was strong and dark. That night, she saw nightmares she had never known. She woke up shaking, unable to explain what she felt. The fear was not hers, but it had become part of her. Felix Braun was the trader. He was calm, confident, and always smiling. He wore a long coat and spoke with charm. He didn't force anyone to buy or sell. He simply offered choices. He said emotions were like currency. Some were rare. Some were common. But all had value. He believed that everything could be traded, even the soul. Nora watched quietly. She didn't speak. She didn't touch anything. But she felt something deep inside. The market was not just a place. It was a mirror. It showed what people were willing to give up. It showed what they wanted to feel. And it showed what they feared most, being empty. She saw people selling their happiest memories to pay for comfort. She saw others buying sorrow to feel alive. Some traded love for peace. Some traded pain for silence. The market didn't judge. It only offered. Nora left the shadow market with questions. She didn't make a deal. But she saw what it meant. She understood that emotions were not just feelings. They were pieces of identity. And when people gave them away, they changed. Outside, the city was still quiet. The streets were clean. The people were calm. But Nora knew something was wrong. The shadow market was growing. And if no one stopped it, more people would forget who they were. She walked home slowly, thinking about Eric, Lena, and the others. She thought about the capsules, the memories, the trades. And she asked herself a simple question. What would she give up to feel nothing? The answer was clear. Nothing. Because even pain had meaning. Even sorrow had value. And without them, life was not complete. Chapter 3. Immersion. Nora West returned to the shadow market with a plan. She dressed simply, like the others. She kept her face calm and her steps slow. She pretended to be a buyer. No one stopped her. No one asked questions. The market welcomed silence. Inside, the space was dim and quiet. Soft lights hung from the ceiling like floating stars. The air smelled of metal and dust. People moved between tables, looking at small glass capsules. Each capsule held a memory or an emotion. Some glowed with warm colors. Others were dark and cold. Buyers picked them up, held them close, and sometimes cried. Some smiled. Some looked lost. Nora walked slowly, watching everything. She saw a man holding a capsule labeled First Kiss. He closed his eyes and smiled. A woman nearby held one marked Grief. Her hands shook. Another person bought Childhood Joy and laughed for the first time in years. It was strange and beautiful, but also sad. These emotions were not theirs. They were borrowed. They were bought. In the far corner of the market, Nora saw an older woman sitting alone. Her name was Maya Keller. She had once been a famous actress. Her face was still elegant, but her eyes were empty. In front of her was a small box filled with capsules. Each one held a piece of her past. A scene from a play. A moment of love. A memory of applause. She sold them one by one. She no longer remembered the roles she played or the people she loved. She had given them away. Nora sat nearby and watched Maya. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She saw what the market had done. Maya was not just selling memories. She was losing herself. Each capsule taken was a part of her gone forever. Her voice, her passion, her story faded. Nora looked around again. She saw others like Maya. People who had sold too much. Their faces were calm, but their eyes were blank. They moved slowly, without purpose. They had no past, no pain, no joy. They were hollow. Then she saw the buyers. Some were young, like Lena Hoffman. Lena stood near a table, holding a capsule with both hands. Her face was pale. She had already taken someone's fear. Now she looked at another capsule labeled Freedom. She wanted to feel something better. But Nora saw the danger. Too many borrowed emotions could confuse the soul. A person could forget what was real and what was not. Felix Braun stood near the center of the market. He watched everything with a calm smile. He wore a dark coat and spoke softly to those who asked. He didn't push anyone. He only offered. He believed in choice. He believed that people had the right to trade their feelings. But Nora saw something else in his eyes. He knew the cost. He had seen it many times. Nora left the market that night with a heavy heart. She had not bought or sold anything. But she had seen the truth. The shadow market was not just a place to feel. It was a place to forget. It was a place where people gave away their pain, their joy, their love, and slowly lost who they were. She walked home through the quiet streets of Hamburg. The city lights were soft. The air was still. But inside her, something had changed. She could not forget what she had seen. She could not ignore the emptiness in Maya's eyes. She knew now that the market was not just dangerous. It was powerful. And it was growing. Nora promised herself one thing. She would not become hollow. She would not trade her truth. Even if it hurt. Even if it was heavy. Because to feel was to live. And to remember was to be human. Chapter 4. The Choice. The shadow market was quiet that evening. The lights were dim, and the air felt heavy. Nora West walked slowly between the tables. She had been there before, but this time was different. She was not just watching. She was searching. She had found something unexpected, a memory file labeled with her mother's name. It was stored in a capsule, glowing softly like a small flame. Nora had never seen this memory before. It was not part of her own vault. It had been taken from someone else, maybe sold long ago. She didn't know what it contained. A moment of love? A goodbye? A secret? She could buy it. She could hold it. She could feel something she had never known. But she hesitated. If she took the memory, it would become part of her. It would change her. It would fill a space that had always been empty. But it would also rewrite something inside her. She asked herself if she wanted truth or comfort. She stood still, holding the capsule, feeling the weight of the choice. Eric Muller sat nearby, staring at the floor. He had sold the memory of his daughter years ago. He had done it to escape pain. But now he wanted it back. He had searched the market, asked questions, begged for help. Felix Braun had listened, but only shook his head. Once a memory was sold, it could not be returned. It belonged to someone else now. Eric felt broken. He had lost not just the memory, but the part of himself that loved. He had made a choice, and now he lived with the silence. Lena Hoffman stood at the edge of the market, holding a capsule marked fear. She had taken it by accident, and now it lived inside her. She saw shadows in her sleep, felt panic in her chest, and didn't know why. She wanted to give it back, but the trader said it was too late. The emotion had become part of her. She could not remove it. She could only learn to live with it. Lena was young, and the fear was strong. But she didn't run. She stayed. She wanted to understand. Maya Keller sat in her usual corner. She looked at the stage in front of her, a small platform used for performances. She had once stood there, full of life, full of voice. Now she watched in silence. She had sold her memories of the stage, of applause, of passion. She no longer remembered the roles she played. She no longer felt the joy of acting. But something inside her still moved. She didn't know the lines, but she knew the rhythm. She didn't know the story, but she felt the emotion. Maya had lost her past, but not her soul. Felix Braun walked through the market, calm and confident. He spoke to buyers and sellers, offering capsules with soft words. He never pushed. He never lied. He only reminded people that every emotion had a price. He believed in freedom of choice. But he also knew the cost. He had seen people change. He had seen people disappear. He had seen people become someone else. Nora stood with the capsule in her hand. She thought about her mother. She thought about the pain of not knowing. She thought about the risk of knowing too much. She could buy the memory. She could feel something real. But she could also lose part of herself. She could become someone shaped by a moment she never lived. She placed the capsule back on the table. She chose to remain whole. That night, the market was quiet, but full of questions. Everyone stood before a choice. To keep their truth, or to borrow someone else's. To carry their pain, or to trade it for peace. To remember, or to forget. And in that silence, the real value of emotion became clear. It was not in the capsule. It was in the courage to feel. Chapter 5. Resistance. The shadow market continued to grow, but something new began to rise quietly in the corners of Hamburg. It was not loud. It was not organized. It started with a few people who felt something missing inside them. They didn't want to buy emotions anymore. They wanted to feel their own. They wanted to remember. Nora West was the first to act. She had seen too much. She had watched people lose themselves. She had felt the danger of forgetting. She decided to do something. She began to speak to others, carefully, quietly. She found people who were ready to resist. Not with anger, but with memory. She invited them to meet in a small room above an old bookstore. It was dusty and cold, but safe. There were no capsules, no trades, no glowing lights. Only chairs, paper, and silence. The group was small at first. Just Nora, Eric, Lena, and Maya. But it was enough. Eric Muller came with a notebook. He had lost the memory of his daughter, but he still remembered her name. He began to write. Not the exact moments, but the feelings. He wrote about her smile, her voice, the way she held his hand. He didn't try to recreate the memory. He tried to rebuild the love. Each word was a step back to himself. Lena Hoffman brought her drawings. She had taken someone's fear, and it lived inside her. She couldn't remove it, but she could explore it. She painted dark shapes, sharp lines, and strange shadows. She didn't hide from the fear. She looked at it. She gave it form. And slowly, she began to understand it. It was not just pain. It was part of her growth. Maya Keller stood in the center of the room. She didn't remember the plays she had once performed. But she remembered the feeling of being on stage. She began to move, to speak, to act, not with scripts, but with emotion. Her scenes had no names, no titles. But they were real. She performed from the heart. And the others watched in silence, feeling something deep and true. Nora didn't lead with rules. She led with questions. She asked people to share what they felt, not what they bought. She asked them to describe moments they had never traded. She believed that memory was not just a file. It was a living part of the soul. And if people could learn to feel again, they could become whole. Felix Braun knew about the group. He didn't stop them. He didn't warn them. He watched from a distance. He understood that the market had limits. It could offer emotions, but it could not replace truth. He saw that some people were choosing a different path. And he respected it. The group grew slowly. More people came. Some had sold too much. Some had bought too often. But they all wanted to remember. They wrote, painted, performed, and listened. They didn't try to erase the past. They tried to feel it again. Outside, the city stayed quiet. The trains ran on time. The streets were clean. But inside that small room, something powerful was happening. People were learning to resist. Not with violence. Not with protest. But with memory. They were choosing to feel. They were choosing to remember. And in that choice, they were finding themselves again. Chapter 6. Disappearance. The shadow market did not vanish overnight. It faded slowly, like a light dimming at the end of the day. The soft glow of emotion capsules grew weaker. The quiet voices of buyers became fewer. The tables stood still, untouched. Something had changed. People stopped coming. Not all at once, but one by one. Some had found what they were looking for. Others had realized they were losing themselves. The market, once full of trade and desire, became silent. The capsules remained, but the hunger for them did not. Nora West watched this change with calm eyes. She had seen the danger. She had felt the weight of memory. She had helped others remember without buying. Now, she knew her work in the archive was finished. She closed the doors for the last time. The files inside were untouched, but she no longer believed in storing lives. She believed in living them. Erich Muller returned to the small room above the bookstore. He continued to write. His notebook was full of thoughts, feelings, and quiet memories. He could not recover the exact moments with his daughter, but he could feel her presence in his words. The pain returned, but so did the love. He was no longer empty. He was human again. Lena Hoffman painted every day. Her fear had not disappeared, but it had changed. It was no longer a stranger. It was part of her story. She used dark colors, sharp lines, and soft shadows. Her art spoke of courage, not panic. She shared her work with others, helping them face their own emotions. She had grown stronger, not by forgetting, but by understanding. Maya Keller stood on a small stage in a quiet theater. The lights were soft, and the seats were half full. She performed a scene that had no script. Her voice was steady, her movements graceful. She didn't remember the lines, but she felt the truth. The audience watched in silence. They didn't know the story, but they understood the feeling. Maya had found her voice again, not through memory, but through emotion. Felix Braun left the market without a word. His table was empty. His coat was gone. The capsules remained, untouched. No one knew where he went. Some said he had moved to another city. Others believed he had simply stopped. He had watched people change. He had seen resistance grow. He had known the market could not last forever. The city of Hamburg stayed quiet. The streets were clean. The trains ran on time. But something was different. People began to speak more openly. They shared stories. They cried in public. They laughed without fear. The silence was no longer forced. It was natural. The shadow market had not been destroyed. It had been forgotten. Not by force, but by choice. People chose memory over trade. They chose feeling over control. They chose truth over comfort. And in that choice, something beautiful happened. Life returned. Not perfect, not easy, but real. Nora walked through the city one evening. She saw a child playing in the rain. She saw an old couple holding hands. She saw a young artist painting on a wall. She smiled quietly. The market was gone, but its lesson remained. Memory should not be stored. It should be lived. Chapter 7. Resolution. The city of Hamburg changed slowly. It didn't return to the old ways of silence and control. It didn't become loud or chaotic either. It became something new. It became real. People started to talk about their feelings. They didn't always know the right words. They didn't always feel safe. But they tried. And that was enough. Nora West no longer worked in the archive. She had spent years organizing memories that were never lived again. Now she spent her days listening. She met people in parks, cafes, and quiet rooms. She asked them about their lives. She didn't record their stories. She remembered them. She believed that every emotion had value, even the ones that hurt. She helped others understand that forgetting was not healing. Feeling was. Erich Muller became a teacher. He didn't teach medicine anymore. He taught something deeper. He spoke to young people about loss, love, and memory. He used his own story, not the exact details, but the truth behind them. He told them that pain was not the enemy. It was part of being alive. His students listened. Some cried. Some asked questions. Eric didn't have all the answers. But he had his heart back. And that was enough. Lena Hoffman became an artist. Her paintings were bold and strange. They showed fear, hope, confusion, and joy. She didn't hide her emotions. She used them. She painted what she felt, not what others wanted to see. Her work was raw and honest. People came to her shows and stood in silence. They didn't always understand the images. But they felt something. Lena had learned that emotions were not problems to fix. They were colors to use. Maya Keller returned to the stage. She didn't perform old plays. She created new ones. Her scenes had no scripts. They were built from movement, voice, and feeling. She invited others to join her, people who had lost memories, people who had sold emotions, people who wanted to feel again. Together, they made something beautiful. Maya didn't remember every role she had played. But she remembered how it felt to be seen. And now, she helped others feel that too. Felix Braun was gone. No one knew where he went. His table in the shadow market stayed empty. Some said he had left the city. Others believed he had stopped trading emotions. Maybe he had learned something too. Maybe he had seen that the market was not the answer. It was only a question. And the people had found their own way to respond. The shadow market was no longer active. It was no longer needed. It had tested people. It had tempted them. It had shown them what they could lose. But it had also helped them see what they could keep. Their truth. Their pain. Their love. The city was still quiet. But now, the silence was different. It was not empty. It was full of feeling. People walked slowly. They looked at each other. They shared stories. They made mistakes. They forgave. They remembered. Nora stood one evening by the river. She watched the water move. She thought about the market, the memories, the people. She didn't feel regret. She felt peace. She had lived through something hard. And she had come out stronger. The true value of human experience was not in comfort. It was in honesty. Emotions could not be bought or sold. They could only be lived. And by living them, people became who they truly were. Moral: true emotion is not a product. It cannot be traded, copied, or borrowed. It must be felt, faced, and lived. Only through honest experience do we grow, connect, and become fully human. Thank you for your attention. If you like the story, please like and subscribe. It motivates us to make new videos and helps us promote the channel. Thank you.